Good afternoon. I'm Victoria Marshall with the latest news from the Washington Watch news desk. Vice President Kamala Harris is expected to announce new parts of her economic plan at a campaign stop today in New Hampshire. A Harris campaign official told The Hill that the Democratic nominee is proposing expanding the small business tax deduction for startup expenses from $5,000 to $50,000, with the goal of 25 million new small business applications in her first term if elected. Policy analysts say Harris's plan would cost American taxpayers $20 billion over the next 10 years. Now, this is all part of a strategy by the Harris campaign to court working and middle-class voters, even as the Democratic Party increasingly becomes the party of the ultra-rich. Here's what Harris's running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, said at a campaign rally on Monday.
Vice President Harris was the deciding vote on the American Rescue Plan that kept workers on the job and the public safe during the pandemic. It was Vice President Harris and President Biden that protected over 1 million workers' pensions and retirees that we got back. And it's not bragging if it's true. She was part of the most pro-union administration in American history. The blue wall stands firm. It stands with workers.
This comes as former President Trump and Vice President Harris are neck and neck in the polls, especially in key battleground states such as Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Nevada. Trump will make his case for why he should be reelected to a second term to voters tonight in Pennsylvania at a Fox News town hall. And believe it or not, voting begins this week. The first ballots of the 2024 election go out Friday in North Carolina. And in other domestic news, the Supreme Court on Tuesday denied a request from Oklahoma to reinstate over $4 million in federal funding for family planning projects by the Department of Health and Human Services. Federal law requires states to provide abortion counseling and referrals as part of the grant's funding parameters. But because Oklahoma law bars the state from advising women to obtain abortions, it asked to be exempt from that rule. But instead of complying, Health and Human Services terminated Oklahoma's grant. Oklahoma then went to federal court, challenging the termination and seeking to require the department to renew the grant for the years 2024 through 2025. The district court denied the state's request for temporary relief, and the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit upheld that ruling. Then Oklahoma came to the Supreme Court on August 5th and asked the justices to step in. The court denied the state's request in an unsigned order on Tuesday without explanation of its reasoning. 3 justices, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Neil Gorsuch, indicated that they would have granted the state's request. Now, Oklahoma has argued that the federal grant funds are part of the front line of health care in Oklahoma, and the loss of such funds would be devastating to its communities. And in other domestic news, yesterday, a former deputy chief of staff to New York Governor Kathy Hochul was charged by the Department of Justice with acting as an agent for the Chinese government. Linda Sun, a former aide to both New York Governor Hochul and former Governor Andrew Cuomo, was charged with violating and conspiring to violate the Foreign Agents Registrations Act, visa fraud, alien smuggling, and money laundering conspiracy. Her husband and co-defendant, Chris Hugh, was also charged with money laundering conspiracy. Sun acted as an undisclosed agent of the Chinese government while her husband, Hugh, facilitated the transfer of millions of dollars in kickbacks for personal gain, prosecutors said in a news release. Prosecutors allege that while Sun worked for the New York government, she influenced the messaging of high-level state officials regarding issues of importance to China, blocked Taiwanese government representatives from access to the officials, and obtained official New York State proclamations for Chinese government representatives without authorization. Sun and Hugh were arrested at their Long Island residence Tuesday morning and pleaded not guilty to all charges in federal court that afternoon. And those are today's headlines. I'm Victoria Marshall. For more news and commentary, be sure to check out the Washington Stand at washingtonstand.com. Up next is Washington Watch with Tony Perkins. We'll see you tomorrow with more news and commentary.
from the heart of our nation's capital in Washington, D.C., bringing compelling interviews, insightful analysis, taking you beyond the headlines and sound bites into conversations with our nation's leaders and newsmakers, all from a biblical worldview. Sitting in for Tony is today's host, Jody Heiss.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to this Wednesday edition of Washington Watch. I'm your host, Jody Heiss, Senior Vice President here at the Family Research Council and President of FRC Action. Before I get into some of the details that we'll be covering today, let me first of all send a huge sense of sympathy and prayers to those in Barrow County, Georgia, where yet again we've had a mass shooting in a high school, the Appalachia High School in Barrow County. I would encourage each of you to join us in keeping those families, the student body, and especially the families of those who lost ones in your prayers today. Unbelievable that we continue dealing with these type of tragedies. It is a reflection of the evil that has come into our culture. All right, coming up on today's program. Yesterday, the U.S. Justice Department announced the unsealing of terrorism, murder conspiracy, and sanctions evasion charges against 6 senior leaders of Hamas.
Today, the Justice Department unsealed charges against Yahya Sinwar and other senior leaders of Hamas for financing and directing a decades-long campaign to murder American citizens and endanger the security of the United States.
Well, that was U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland, and certainly the recognition of terrorist atrocities perpetrated by Hamas is welcome, and it also certainly stands in contrast to the statement made over the weekend by President Biden, who was at that time more critical of Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu than he was of the ones who were behind the 6 hostage murders over the weekend.
Thinking about the moments that those boys and girls were waiting and actually knew that they're going to execute them. Those are savages. They are the ones to be blamed, and we expect our ally, the U.S., to say it very clearly. Hamas is to be blamed for the fact we don't have a deal today.
Well, that was Israel's ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, yesterday on Fox and Friends. I'll be joined in just a moment by Congressman Scott Perry to get his thoughts on the latest. I'll also get his insights on the upcoming battle over government funding, which Republicans hope will include their election integrity bill. And speaking of election integrity, I'll be joined later in the program by Ken Blackwell to talk about what Republican governors and lawmakers can do ahead of Election Day. And trust me, it's already underway this week in some states. Also on today's program, we'll take a dive into a Supreme Court decision yesterday that denied an emergency request from Oklahoma for an injunction to reinstate over $4 million in Title X funds. And all this is happening while the state's challenge to those funds are taking place, working their way through the lower courts. And there is much, much more than meets the eye to this important case. And so we'll be talking about that a little later on. And then finally, the Kamala Harris bus tour of death, or she describes it as the bus tour of reproductive freedom. But it kicked off yesterday in Florida, of all places, where voters will be deciding on the fate of an amendment proposal that will enshrine an absolute right to abortion up to birth in Florida's state constitution.
In November, we must choose a future where women's rights are respected and reproductive freedom is guaranteed. And that is why in the state of Florida, we are going to show the rest of the country who we are here. We will pass Amendment 4 and make sure to enshrine reproductive freedom into our rights.
Well, that was former Congresswoman Debbie McCarcel-Powell speaking at yesterday's event. And while we certainly should not, in fact, we are not at all surprised that the Democrats are talking it up on abortion this election season, the question is, are they also hoping that Americans won't be aware of the racist roots that lie beneath the abortion industry? This is something you don't want to miss, and we'll be covering the details of that later on in the program. So we've got a lot coming your way. The website is always TonyPerkins.com. Tons of information there for you, including a link to Family Research Council's 2024 election survey. This is a survey we're asking you to join so that we can hear what is most important to you, and your voice can make a difference as we enter into this election cycle. So to stand for truth, to stand for faith, to stand for family, to stand for freedom, please let us know what's important to you going into this election cycle. You can participate in the survey simply by texting the word election to 67742. That's election to 67742. All right, let's jump into today's program. The killing of 6 hostages in Gaza over the weekend certainly marked the beginning of a new chapter in the Israel-Hamas war. And Hamas is now threatening to execute more hostages if Israel attempts further rescues. And on top of all that, there's much less optimism, we can put it that way, for any kind of hostage deal now. Senior government officials in Washington reportedly expressing despair and frustration about the state of the talks. The question is, are we now at a critical juncture? Well, joining me now to discuss this and more is Congressman Scott Perry. He serves on 4 House committees, including the extremely important Intelligence Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee. He represents the 10th Congressional District of the great state of Pennsylvania. Congressman Perry, always great to see you. Welcome back to Washington Watch.
Jody, it's good to see you, my friend. And I got to just tell you, I'm appalled. I know you are as well at the position of the Biden administration. These hostages have been held for 11 months, and then to be, probably tormented and tortured throughout that period of time, and then to be shot in the back of the head and executed right now, and that news to come out to the world. Of course, that's horrific enough. But then to have the Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration, come out and call for Israel to engage and lead in a ceasefire. Remember, Israel was attacked by Hamas. They have been continually attacked by Hamas. There can be a ceasefire if Hamas quits attacking Israel and killing Israel's citizens. That's when there can be a ceasefire. As usual, the Biden administration pandering to the pro-Hamas, anti-Semitic crowd within their party in places like Michigan and Wisconsin, trying to split hairs here. Jody, you and I both know there is good and there is evil, and you can't split hairs in this kind of thing. To me, it's embarrassing and disappointing when the ambassador from Israel has to remind the United States of America that they're a friend of Israel. That is unacceptable to me.
Yeah, it's stunning from every angle that you look at this. I mean, President Biden is saying at least the other day over the weekend that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not doing enough. And yet we all know who the bad guys are in this. Why is it that you believe that Israel is receiving really the lion's share of international criticism when we all know who really the bad guys are here?
Well, the Israelis and, of course, the Jews in particular have always been at the end of criticism around the globe. That's probably never going to change for whatever reason the anti-Semites feel that that's appropriate. But I think, unfortunately, the United States of America allows that to go on by playing into that, by being weak on our support for Israel, even if rhetorically. I mean, saying that the prime minister is not doing enough. All he's doing is defending his people and defending his country. Meanwhile, every offer that's been put on the table has come from Israel and been rejected by Hamas. What more, the only thing that's more left to do is to just hand over the country of Israel and its citizens to the terrorists and the murderers. I suspect that's what the only thing that's left to make Joe Biden and these international anti-Semites happy.
So let me ask you this, Congressman Perry. Yesterday, I'm sure you saw the Justice Department announce the unsealing of terrorism, murder conspiracies, sanctions, invasion charges against some leaders of Hamas. How do you respond to all of that? Is this perhaps a change of policy, the beginning of a change of policy, or is this just rhetoric coming from the White House?
Well, Jody, thanks for asking the question. I think it's a combination of rhetoric and the inability to escape reality, right? Of course, Hamas is attacking Jews in Israel on a regular basis, horrifically, but this also includes American citizens. And though the campuses are now rife with pro-Hamas supporters and protest, the Justice Department of which just turns a blind eye, they cannot any longer turn a blind eye to Hamas's operation within the United States and the threats to the United States proper. So I think they just they had to do it. They had no choice. And unfortunately, I hope it's in time that before some tragedy at the hands of Hamas has occurred in the United States of America.
Well, I certainly go along with you on that. I wish I could talk all day with you on this, Congressman, but if I can, let's switch gears. Yeah. The clock is ticking away. Congress comes back next week. There's only 3 weeks before a potential government shutdown is going to occur. Speaker Johnson this morning hosted a call with all you GOP lawmakers to go over the plan. I know you can't talk about that conversation in detail, but whatever you can say, what can you tell us about the battle that's ahead?
Well, the battle ahead is this. As you know, Jody, we're going to run out of funding. We don't have a partner in the Senate with Chuck Schumer there. They have passed 0 appropriations bills. So and they haven't even agreed on a budget, what we call top line number, how much we're going to spend for the year. They can't even agree on that. So knowing that, there's not going to be an agreement. So we're going to be left with a couple options: a continuing resolution, which keeps spending the same amount of money, same policy, until the deal's worked out, or an omnibus, which would be terrible, written in Chuck Schumer's office by his staff, spending wildly terrible policy. What the Speaker has discussed with us is a 6 months continuing resolution. You and I both don't love that, but that gets us into the Trump administration, God willing, if he were to prevail. But included with that would be attaching to that the SAVE Act, which requires states then to verify citizenship of every one of their voters. And that's something that is sorely needed. Of course, it's already illegal for people that are here illegally to vote. But that's not to say it doesn't happen, Jody, because no one's enforcing it. Think about speed limit laws in your state with no police there to ever enforce them. And so this would require states to actually enforce the law. We see it as a potential game changer. We just want our elections to be fair, but determined by American citizens. And the fact that the Democrats oppose that should tell you everything you need to know. But I suspect you're going to see a CR with the SAVE Act coming up in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
All right, less than a minute left on that topic. It's an uphill battle. Schumer's already said dead on arrival.
Yeah, of course.
Do the Republicans have the wherewithal, the will to see this through and to fight for it?
Well, I'm sure going to fight for it. It's the only chance we have. It's either that or a CR with nothing on it, no wins for the Republicans and the American people, or an omnibus, which is even worse. And though Chuck Schumer might say it's dead on arrival, when that's what the House sends him and the House passes that, he's going to have no choice to either accept that or he will be responsible for shutting down the government.
Yeah, and that would be fun to watch how he handles that. Thank you, Congressman Scott Perry of Pennsylvania. Always great to have you on the program. Thanks for your leadership on so many fronts. Good to have you today.
Thank you, Jody, and thank you for the FRC. God bless you.
Thank you. All right, friends, coming up on the other side of the break, FRC Action Special Advisor for Election Integrity, Ken Blackwell, is going to be joining me to talk about why states should pass proof of citizenship laws in order to register to vote. Just common sense. But I can assure you, you don't want to miss what's coming up with Ken Blackwell. Stay tuned. We'll be back right after the break.
Are you a Christian parent looking to raise a spiritual champion in today's culture? Renowned author George Barna has written a new book, Raising Spiritual Champions. This book offers valuable insights based on extensive research conducted by George Barna, the Family Research Council, and Arizona Christian University. Learn how to help your children discern biblical truth and find compelling meaning and purpose. Don't miss out on this essential resource for parents. Order your copy today.
Hello, I'm Jody Heiss, president of FRC Action. Here in America, we thank God for the right to vote, and we can all agree on the importance of this upcoming election. Many of us want to support candidates who share our values, but we're not comfortable supporting the big national political organizations. Well, we have a solution for supporting candidates through FRC Action's Faith, Family, and Freedom Fund. Being a super PAC, it allows for unlimited individual and corporate donations, so we can endorse and fund campaigns for people who share our values. By giving to this fund, we're able to pull all of our contributions together and support and endorse like-minded candidates. That's how we move the needle. So let's be the best stewards possible and get the most out of our political contributions by uniting our efforts. For more information or to contribute, visit faithfamilyfreedomfund.org. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
All of us are born with the desire to find truth and meaning. Where did I come from? What happens when I die? While our answers to these questions may divide us, we are united in our need for the freedom to answer life's biggest questions and make life's biggest decisions for ourselves. That's why religious freedom matters for everyone. Religious freedom matters because the powerful have long wanted to control those who are less powerful. Religious freedom matters because the freedom of those who are different is often threatened by those who believe different is dangerous. At the Center for Religious Liberty at Family Research Council, we promote religious freedom for everyone because the only alternative is religious freedom for no one. We encourage Americans and the American government to engage and advocate for the persecuted, and they do. We work every day to bring good news to the afflicted, to proclaim liberty to captives and freedom to prisoners. We do it because that's what Jesus does. We work to give freedom to others because we ourselves have been set free.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to Washington Watch. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jody Heiss. An honor to be filling in today for Tony. All right, late last month, the U.S. Supreme Court weighed in on an election integrity issue for the first time in the run-up to this presidential election. It was a 5-4 court decision. The justices reinstated a provision in Arizona's election law that requires residents to prove U.S. citizenship when registering to vote using the state registration form. And my next guest says that such election integrity measures should be passed all across the country headed up to Election Day. Joining me now to discuss this is former Ohio Secretary of State Ken Blackwell. I don't know of anyone more equipped to discuss this than he is. He's a senior fellow for human rights and constitutional government at the Family Research Council, as well as FRC Action's special election integrity advisor. Ken, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always an honor to have you.
Jody, it's good to be with you, sir.
Okay, so for those who are watching, listening right now, who may not be familiar with the case in Arizona, give us a little background.
Well, in 2004, Arizona passed legislation requiring citizenship for folks in Arizona to register to vote. It got complicated in 2013 when it was decided that if someone came in and asked for a federal form to register to vote, they did not have to show proof of citizenship. It grew out of a 2013 case in Arizona dealing with one of the Native American groups there. As a consequence, we now have a situation where on a 5-4 decision, as you mentioned, the Supreme Court says the state can go back and require proof of citizenship to register to vote. The caveat there is that if someone comes in and says, I want the federal form, they can get the federal form and fill it out. And what that means is that you have a situation where if the state hasn't divided up there and printed off 2 sets of ballots, one for the feds and one for the Fed and state together, you have a situation where they still have to hand over that that ballot to that citizen that hasn't proved, or excuse me, to that registrant that hasn't proved that he or she is a citizen. So it's convoluted, but here's what we know, Jody. You know, there are citizenship rights and there are citizenship duties. As long as the duty is not convoluted or so complex and intrusive that it becomes a burden, asking for a proof of citizenship should not bother anyone. That's the only way that we can protect the integrity of citizenship and the integrity of our elections. This is a situation that cries out for more people to get involved and engage and become demanding that we have that sort of integrity and protection of citizenship and our national sovereignty. Jody, it goes without saying, anybody who is aware of what is happening in communities like Aurora, Colorado, where gangs of hoodlums are taking over housing complexes, or if you turn to what's happening in New York, and you have the police department saying there that 2 out of every 3 people that they've arrested over the last 3 or 4 days have in fact not been citizens, or they've been non-citizens. That's a real bit of evidence that we're suffering with an open border on the South. We're suffering from an invasion.
Well, we are, and it's tragic and inexcusable, unacceptable on every front, from the crime perspective, the drug perspective, the human trafficking, but just the fact that these people are coming here illegally, and then many of them, we don't know how many, but potentially millions of them can be registered to vote. This is absolutely unacceptable. So what needs to happen? Ken, our time's slipping away here. We have states that do not allow special sessions very quickly. We're just weeks away, certainly no more than a couple of months away from the election. What can states do at this stage in the game to try to secure election integrity?
Well, I think what citizens can do in all of our states is demand election integrity. And by actually shining some spotlight on this challenge, I think that we can pull the curtain down on this illegal action. Here's the reality. Yeah, people can claim that doesn't happen often, but when you have local elections decided by 1 or 2 votes, when you have, elections at the federal level for president in 3 states only separated by, less than 100,000 votes, every vote counts. And so protecting the integrity of the system by making sure that there's no illegal vote that cancels out a legal ballot is prudent. We cannot sit on the sidelines. We, in fact, can't give somebody else the responsibility. Each citizen of the United States has to demand this integrity, has to demand this sort of transparency, have to get involved, and we must continue to make sure that we have as many people as observers and workers at the polling places as all possible, at the precinct level. We must.
Absolutely. All right, we got less than a minute, Ken. When you say citizens have to step up, what does that look like? What does a citizen do if they see something that doesn't look right?
Well, one, when I say citizens must do something, that means that we should not have a polling place in America that is not covered by 2 sets of eyes, bipartisan sets of eyes, so that we have transparency. So make sure you go to your local party, go to your local county office and ask, how can you become involved as a worker or observer? We, in fact, cannot let darkness prevail in this election.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ken Blackwell, FRC Action Special Advisor for Election Integrity. Always great to have you. Thanks for your insight. All right, friends, coming up, the U.S. Supreme Court has decided, at least for now, to allow the Biden-Harris administration the right to deny the state of Oklahoma health care funds over a beloved member of the left's unholy trinity, abortion. Well, we'll discuss all of this right after the break, so stay tuned.
Everything we do begins as an idea. Before there can be acts of courage, there must be the belief that some things are worth sacrificing for. Before there can be marriage, there is the idea that man should not be alone. Before there was freedom, there was the idea that individuals are created equal. It's true that all ideas have consequences, but we're less aware that all consequences are the fruit of ideas. Before there was murder, there was hate. Before there was a Holocaust, there was the belief by some people that other people are undesirable. Our beliefs determine our behavior, and our beliefs about life's biggest questions determine our worldview. Where did I come from? Who decides what is right and wrong? What happens when I die? Our answers to these questions explain why people see the world so differently. Debates about abortion are really disagreements about where life gets its value. Debates over sexuality and gender and marriage are really disagreements about whether the rules are made by us or for us. What we think of as political debates are often much more than that. They're disagreements about the purpose of our lives and the source of truth. As Christians, our goal must be to think biblically about everything. Our goal is to help you see beyond red and blue, left and right, to see the battle of ideas at the root of it all. Our goal is to equip Christians with a biblical worldview and help them advance and defend the faith in their families, communities, and the public square. Cultural renewal doesn't begin with campaigns and elections. It begins with individuals turning from lies to truth. But that won't happen if people can't recognize a lie and don't believe truth exists. We want to help you see the spiritual war behind the political war, the truth claims behind the press release, and the forest from the trees.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to Washington Watch. I am your host, Jody Heiss, and so delighted to have you with us today. All right, this next topic can sound pretty complicated, but I want you to hang in here because this is really an important issue. Yesterday, the U.S. Supreme Court denied an emergency request from Oklahoma for an injunction to reinstate over $4 million in Title X funds, while that whole case now is going to start making its way through the lower courts. Again, this case may seem a little dry, but the implications here are extremely serious, and we want to make sure that you're up to speed on it all. And joining me now to break all this down is Steve Aden, Americans United for Life's Chief Legal Officer and General Counsel. Steve, welcome to Washington Watch. Great to have you.
Thank you, Congressman. It's great to be with you.
Okay, so first of all, maybe a little historical perspective. How did this dispute between Oklahoma and the Biden administration, the HHS in particular, how did all this get started?
Well, Congressman, as you know, the federal government funds family planning programs in the states, has since about 1970. Oklahoma takes a good-sized chunk of that for their family planning programs, principally for poor folks. And the Biden administration, as part of their nonstop attempt to reimpose a federal right to abortion that the Supreme Court said no longer existed in the Dobbs case when it overturned Roe versus Wade, it told the states, if you want federal family planning money under Title X, you're going to have to agree to refer women in Title X programs for abortions. And a lot of states protect life from conception, like Oklahoma, like Tennessee, which had 7 million yanked by the Biden administration. And they said, no, thanks, we're not going to refer for abortion. It's illegal in our state. Well, HHS didn't like that. They yanked the 4 million from Oklahoma for that, the 7 million from Tennessee, and they're going around the country trying to force states to kowtow to the Biden administration's Medicaid officials and refer women for abortion, when in fact it's illegal in a lot of states.
Yeah, so that poses a problem. This looks to me, and please, Steve, tell me if I'm wrong, but I look at this case and it appears to me as another example of the federal government being weaponized to force states that are pro-life to forsake their state laws and bow, as you say, and embrace, in fact, the abortion agenda of the federal government, at least of this Democratic Party. Is that a stretch, or is that, in actuality, what's happening here?
Well, it's not a stretch at all, Congressman, because if the federal government were doing its job under the Constitution, it would enforce and administer a whole host of pro-life laws that Congress has passed over the years, like the Hyde Amendment, which prohibits funding of tax dollars for elective abortions and other things. Instead, they've twisted things around and they've said, well, we're going to force Department of Defense healthcare facilities to provide abortions. We're going to provide for abortions in many other ways. We're going to unleash the power of HHS and the Attorney General to try to force pro-life states to provide for and fund elective abortions. So this is just one example of that, and they're doing it in a number of different ways. This attempted forced referral for abortion is illegal for a couple of reasons. Under federal law as it stands, the Weldon Amendment says that the federal government cannot force states or state health care providers to refer for abortion. It's a conscience provision, but like a lot of provisions, the Biden administration has ignored that one and gone on anyway. But we hope the Supreme Court will clear this up sooner or later.
Yeah, I certainly hope so, because here's another big question that comes to me. A lot of people, a lot of folks these days, and a lot of confusion with this, but many are saying that abortion rights, that life now is a state issue. But what we're seeing in this is a federal government still, right now, today, forcing states that have pro-life laws to forsake those laws. So this would say to me that neither now nor at some point in the future, at the end of the day, is the battle for life ultimately and solely a state issue. There is a role of the federal government.
Oh, absolutely. There are a host of federal laws that protect life, and the administration has to commit to enforcing them instead of trying to circumvent them. I'll give you another example. The Supreme Court just heard a case involving the Biden administration's attempt to force all hospital emergency rooms to do abortions. There's a federal law, EMTALA, which said you can't turn women away or patients away if they're in emergency circumstances from an emergency room. It's a good law. And they, again, have twisted that to say, well, part of healthcare is abortions. So if a woman needs an abortion, she comes to the emergency room, you got to give her one. Well, that's not what the law was meant to do, and yet they have twisted it in a really diabolical way and tried to force hospitals to do that. That's just one of many things they're doing like that.
So this remains a battle that has to be fought diligently on all fronts, the state level as well as the federal level, correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Americans United for Life is fighting the fight in Congress and all 50 states. We're looking forward to the day when there's a constitutional amendment protecting all life, even if that's a generational goal. It took 50 years almost to overturn Roe versus Wade. And if that's how long it takes to enshrine protections for all human life in America, we will do that.
Steve Aden, Americans United for Life, thank you so much for breaking this down for us. It's an extremely important case. Thank you for joining us on Washington Watch.
Thank you, sir.
All right, friends, next, the Kamala Harris bus tour of death, what she calls reproductive freedom, is in full swing. But do Americans know that all of this really is racist in its roots, the abortion industry? Find out more about it on the other side of the break. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back.
Join us October 3rd through the 6th as we gather with spiritually active, governance-engaged conservatives from across America at the Pray, Vote, Stand Summit in Washington, D.C. We'll pray for our nation, engage in government and culture, and stand for biblical truth alongside Christian leaders, worldview experts, and government officials. We'll discuss important issues like the sanctity of life, religious freedom, protecting students, strengthening families, praying for our nation, and how you can impact America's future from a biblical worldview. Our nation stands at a critical juncture, and we must ensure that the issues impacting faith, family, and freedom are understood and advanced. Register now at PrayVoteStand.org. That's PrayVoteStand.org.
Jesus said in John 15, "These things I've spoken to you, that my joy may remain in you, and that your joy may be full." In 2024, in these divided and uncertain times, how can this be possible? By abiding in Him through His Word. At Family Research Council, we want to help you do that, which is the reason for the Stand on the Word Bible reading plan. In just 10 to 15 minutes each day, you will have read the entire Bible in just 2 years. But more importantly, you will be abiding in Him daily. Find our Bible reading plan at frc.org/Bible. And join Tony Perkins each weekday for a 10-minute devotional inspired by the daily reading and designed to encourage you on this journey through the Bible. Listen on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and YouTube. And remember, the grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of our God will stand forever.
Research has found that there are 59 million American adults who are a lot like you. There are millions of people around the country who are born again, deeply committed to practicing their faith, and believe the Bible is the reliable Word of God. But that's not all. They're also engaged in our government. They're voters. They're more likely to be involved in their community, and they're making a difference in elections. The problem is that a lot of them feel alone too. We want to change that. FRC wants to connect these 59 million Americans to speak the truth together, no matter the cost. If you want to learn more about this group and what it means to be a spiritually active, governance-engaged conservative, or if you want to find out if you are one of these sage cons yourself, join us. Go to frc.org/SAGECON, SageCon, to learn more. That's SAGECON, SageCon, to learn more.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today on Washington Watch. Welcome back. I am your host, Jody Heiss. And just by way of reminder, our powerful Pray Vote Stand Summit is coming up October 3rd through the 6th in Washington, D.C. We would absolutely love for you to come join us. To get more information or to register today, you can go to PrayVoteStand.org. PrayVoteStand.org. I encourage you to do that right away. I also, again, one more time, want to encourage you to join FRC Council's 2024 election survey. This is going to let your voice be heard as we enter into this election cycle. What is important to our nation? What's important to Christians? Who else is going to tell us but Christians? So we encourage you to let us know. You can join the survey by texting the word election to 67742. All right. Speaking of elections, the Harris-Walz campaign kicked off what they are calling the Onboard the Reproductive Freedom Bus Tour. Most of us really know that it's a bus tour of death, as they're just promoting abortion. But they started the tour yesterday in hopes in Florida, but they're hoping to make 50 stops all across the nation. And that in addition to the new Democrat ads that are coming out in New York, California, Nevada, they are making it abundantly clear, if it were not already abundantly clear, that the issue of abortion will be the spotlight for them as we head towards November. At the same time, Democrats are accusing Republicans of being extremists. Republicans have the dangerous agenda. That, at least according to the Democrats. But as we've been pointing out, it's the Democrats who are extreme. They literally are wanting taxpayer-funded abortion on demand for any reason up until birth in all 50 states. Well, my next guest says that abortion advocacy is not only extreme, it's also racist. Well, joining me now to discuss this is Pastor John Amanchukwu. He is one of the pastors at the Upper Room Church of God in Christ in Raleigh, North Carolina, a powerful speaker. He and I were at an event together at Sea Island, Georgia, a couple of months ago, my first opportunity to hear him in person, and it was phenomenal. He's also the author of the book Erased, Uncovering the Lies of Critical Race Theory and Abortion. Pastor John, welcome to Washington Watch. It's an honor to have you, my friend.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on. It's good to see you again.
It is likewise great to see you. All right, listen, before we jump into the racism aspect of all of this, which nobody is able to unfold that like you. But before we get into that aspect of it, what's your take on the Waltz Harris bus tour that I just referenced? Democrats are coming out with what I prefer to call a bus tour of death.
Truly it is to have that setup at the DNC and now transversing the country really says something about the Democrat Party that me and you already know, that it's a party of death. Margaret Sanger wanted to exterminate the Negro population. There's a letter that she wrote to Dr. Clarence C.J. Gamble. And in that letter, she said she did not want the word to get out that she wanted to exterminate the Negro population, and that she would use the Black charismatic preacher to convince other Blacks to abort their babies. What we're seeing right now with the Harris and Waltz campaign, they're only furthering the plan and the strategy of Margaret Sanger. If you are pro-abortion, you're also pro-racism. And it's time for Americans to really understand what that truly says about a political party who seeks to do that. Margaret Sanger was the darling of the KKK. They brought her into their functions and allowed her to speak on multiple occasions. And today, Tim Waltz and Kamala Harris, a fake Black woman, wants to say that they support them, and Blacks are supposed to go along with that for the sake of identity politics. Because I'm a Black man, I should vote for someone who looks like me, regardless of the fact that they want to kill as many Black babies as possible. 20 million Black babies are missing since the inception of Roe v. Wade, and we are supposed to support the Democrat Party? For any Christian who casts a vote for the Democrat Party, they're not doing that based upon the Bible. They're doing that based upon secular humanism and postmodernism and a new Christ and a new Bible and a new doctrine of the faith, not based upon Christian principles.
So how did this happen, Pastor? How does someone like Margaret Sanger come into the picture like she did with the motive that you just described she had to eliminate the Negro race as you described it? How does she do that? And then at the same time, use Black pastors to push that message forward? It just seems so puzzling to me to figure out how all this came together.
I have to say it. Bear with me. White liberals have always sought to destroy Blacks and to keep us bound in slavery. You know, it was the Democrat Party that did not want to end slavery. It was the Democrat Party that drafted the Jim Crow laws. It was the Democrat Party that voted against the Civil Rights Act. With strong support from the Democrat Party, they pushed the ideologies of Roe versus Wade. With the strong support of the Democrat Party, Planned Parenthood receives nearly $500 to $600 million a year in federal funding. And now with the support of the Democrat Party, a Black woman, supposedly, Kamala Harris, we're being told to support the Democrat Party, a party that wants to kill babies all the way up to 9 months. Now, one has to ask yourself, why are so many Blacks gullible? Why are they supporting a political party that seeks to destroy them? Well, it's very complicated, but you have to go back to the time frame of Lyndon B. Johnson. Lyndon B. Johnson came up with a Great Society plan. He found a creative way to remove the Black man from the home and to replace him with a $300 to $400 check. He created welfare states and incentivized the single-parent family. And from there, it broke the back of the black community as it relates to our marriage rates. From the 1890s all the way up to the 1950s, the black marriage rate rivaled that of whites. But when Lyndon B. Johnson came along with his Great Society plan, he obliterated the black community. Kamala Harris can care less about black Americans. She solely cares about criminal illegal aliens. So the criminal illegal aliens get jobs, but blacks get welfare. The criminal illegal aliens are told to come into our country and we'll give your children asylum. Blacks are being told, and Americans across the board are being told, to abort your baby. And now we have buses going around the country in the name of protecting the Democrat democracy. Someone has to die. Some baby must have their limbs ripped from their body. Some baby must have their skull crushed. This is insane and barbaric. We don't want to support a political party, nor should we, that seeks to do these things. And if they can't kill the baby in the womb, I know from a firsthand account that they want to indoctrinate children in the public school system. So if you can't kill them in the womb, turn them into transgenders in the classroom. Push gender theory and queer theory upon them. Confuse them. And we know that God is not the author of confusion. We know that Satan is. Satan is the author of confusion. He's also the deceiver of the brethren. And so the Democrat Party offers nothing to America. But so many people have been duped and hoodwinked. And this is why now more than ever, the church must use her voice and speak up. Pastors who are on the fence and playing these soft, weak games of, we can't talk about politics, or, the pastor must stay in his particular role. And, the Bible is not political. All of these lies, there are many preachers today who, instead of telling their congregation to vote biblical values, they will much rather say nothing and be liberal and progressive. The Bible is political.
Absolutely. It addresses all these issues that you're speaking of. Why do you think, Pastor John, that there seems to be a great willingness to speak out against deadly encounters with police, which there should be? I'm not trying to sweep that under the rug. Where it's unjust, it's unjust.
Sure.
But there seems to be a much greater willingness to speak out against that, but not against 20 million black babies that have been killed. Why is that?
Well, when you are a race baiter, I'm talking about men like Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, it pays the bills to be a race hustler and to divide people through Marxist tactics, And within Marxism, you must know how it works. There must be chaos. There must be division. There must be blacks versus white, the rich versus the poor, the patriarchy versus the matriarchy, the LGBTQIA plus community versus those who are straight. Marxism thrives through division. But there are individuals out there, you're right, who would much rather talk about the white cop who kills a person regardless of what they're doing or not, or whether or not it was deserved. They would much rather talk about that than the 20 million black babies that have been killed in this country. It's intentional. They sweep these things under the rug because it doesn't fit the narrative. And the moment some isolated incident shows up, they say, aha, we got you now. America is a racist nation, and it's time to burn down neighborhoods and communities. And so these things are strategies. They are strategies. And listen, the left is waiting for the next opportunity for that to take place so that they can rip our country apart. I say to everyone out there that we need to listen with the mind of Christ, right? We must use the fruit of the Spirit to listen, to understand rightly what is going on and be discerning, because so many today are being tripped up off of trivial things as a means of pulling someone to their political party.
Absolutely. All right, so if I can, Pastor, let me switch gears with you just a little bit. Same general topic, but a different angle of it. There's I guess several areas, but another glaring one where Democrats claim to be backing the black community, but they're not, and that's when it comes to wages, and particularly lower wages. How has the Biden-Harris administration, particularly the border policy, impacted lower wage earners?
It has impacted it substantially. You know, keep in mind over 10 plus million criminal illegal aliens have come into our country. Now, I don't call them newcomers or asylum seekers. Many of these individuals are military age, and oftentimes they find a way into the country and they leave their children and their families behind. And so, yes, they have taken jobs from blacks. This is true. You know, America only has but so many resources. You know, and when you come into economically disadvantaged communities and these individuals are giving thousands of dollars to purchase homes and to have different handouts from the federal government, these things will impact other economically disadvantaged people in those communities. But I think there is a strategy here. You know, how does the Democrat Party find a new Negro, right? How do they find a new voting bloc? Well, it's called cheap votes. And that's why the leftists don't want to shut the border, because they have the opportunity to bring in a mass of people who will support their political party. And so that's what's taking place. And yes, it has hurt black Americans. And keep in mind, black Americans are aware now. You know, in 2020, President Trump received nearly 9% of the black vote. In 2024, he's trending around 24%. That is astronomical.
That's huge. Yeah,
that's major.
It is.
And I'm doing everything within my power to make sure that we move that trend in the right direction, not simply and solely for the sake of President Trump, but for the fact that we don't want to support a political party that wants to abort children.
All right, let's end there. We've only got about 60 seconds left here. What do you say to black pastors, black leaders, black voters right now as we enter into this election cycle? 60 seconds.
Number one, the blood will be on your hands if you fail to preach the whole counsel of the Word of God. If you fail to point out the error of these current administrations, God is going to judge you for that. You know, every man shall stand before the judgment seat of Christ to give an answer of what he's done in his body, and whether it be good or bad. The Apostle Paul says we persuade men. You know, we persuade men knowing that this danger is coming. And so it's imperative now more than ever that pastors tell their congregations to vote biblical values, not based upon personalities, but biblical values. And no, Jesus is not on the ballot, but he's going to hold us accountable of how we vote.
Absolutely, he will. Pastor John Amanchukwu, always great to see you. Thank you so much for your leadership on this, and may God bless your voice to just be amplified across this country. Thank you for joining us today on Washington Watch.
Thank you kindly. God bless you.
God bless you. All right, friends, thank you so much. This wraps up yet another edition of Here at Washington Watch. Hope you have a fantastic remainder of your evening. We'll see you next time, right here on Washington Watch.
Washington Watch with Tony Perkins is brought to you by Family Research Council and is entirely listener-supported. Portions of the show discussing candidates are brought to you by Family Research Council Action. For more information on anything you heard today, or to find out how you can partner with us in our ongoing efforts to promote faith, family, and freedom, visit TonyPerkins.com.